once again to the Necro Zoo. I am Bones. And in this one, let's go ahead and add one more figure to my McFarlane DC Multiverse collection. Now today we will take a look at Steel. Now this is a highly anticipated figure coming out from McFarlane's DC Multiverse. Everybody everybody loves the Reign of Supermen, and eventually we hope to get all the characters represented from that storyline. Very, very highly popular characters from the Superman lore, and I think this one's even sold out on the McFarlane toy store, but I was able to pick one up before they sold out. Now, this is a standard release, so we know that eventually he will be at most outlets, but it's pretty cool to get a first-hand look at him, especially because this is a character that I do enjoy. Now, he does look pretty weaponized in the packaging, but let's go ahead and take a closer look at him. But first, he does come with your standard black DC Multiverse stand. Now, of course, these are not really needed, but sometimes they do come in useful. He also comes with his data file card. On the front, you do have some source material from the character. Now, there are different versions of him through different ages from the comics. His suit and armor does change minimally, but his basic suit and its unique design are usually represented in the source material. Now, John Henry Steele, pretty cool backstory in the comics of how he became not only a big supporter of Superman, but eventually went on to fight by his side. There's another, connection with him, and that is the old John Henry stories from back in the day. I remember those sticking out to me, like on different TV shows, and even I think there was animated versions of the story where John Henry goes up against a locomotive to see who could lay more track in a sort of weird, crazy competition between man and machine. And man, that those stories always really got to me. And something that really stuck with me throughout my adolescence and growing up, I always thought that was an awesome, truly heroic character that I really come to identify with as a very hardworking individual. Now, on the back, you do have some information, basically the breakdown of his history in the comics. Pretty awesome. We'll hold on to that. Now, he only comes with one accessory, and that is his trusty hammer. Now, for all the unique sculpt work, I think the cape is even unique to this figure, and all the original parts that they used for him. I don't really mind that he doesn't come with alternate hands, but that is always something that I wish would be standard with McFarlane. At least a fist or at least two alternating hands would really raise the value of each figure, even for these figures that are your lower price pointed figures, which is $22.99. I just think that little detail would add something. But I also do understand that, like I said, this is an original sculpt, original design for this figure. And it's nice to see that from McFarlane after seeing a lot of reuse, which is another thing that just comes with the territory for action figure lines. It's always nice to see what really brought me and attracted me to McFarlane, which was the original sculpts and that always present attention to detail. But the hammer is really nice. It's a little bit soft, but I mean, there is a reason why McFarlane makes the weapons like this. Now, of course, we don't like them to be too soft to where they're just, flopping around, but it is to reduce the risk of breakage. So I do understand that. And for what it is a really nice weapon. And as I said before, if you look deeper, it does have some pretty cool detail and added battle damage and design. Pretty sweet. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the figure. Now, I have really been anticipating looking at this guy. Now, although I do watch a lot of reviews, especially reviews from smaller channels, I always take that information and hold on to it. But I always wait till I have the figure in hand. That way I can make my own observations and my own opinions of what I actually think of the figure. I think I heard some guy, just basically with the pictures and the images that were released, right away he said that it was trash. He, he said that McFarlane cut off the lower part of the S to save on plastic, which now that I actually have the figure in hand, what I do notice is that if you look on the back of the box and even on the card, this is actually the design of this version of Steel, where he doesn't have that point at the bottom of the Superman shield. He kind of has it flattened out at the bottom. And so that is actually the way it is designed in the comics. But other than that, taking in my first impressions, really nice, hefty figure. You could right away see all the details and intricate design that I have come to expect from McFarlane. Pretty interesting to see just how much he does follow the comic design and how much liberties he takes with the figure. But all in all, it's a Steel figure. Now, I know another big contention online was the colors that he chose. He went with sort of a more steel, dull looking color for the body, which is just molded plastic. And although he did add splashes of blue to give it like a little bit of glimmer or highlights to the steel color, a lot of people weren't too happy of the dullness of the gray. And although I do want a figure exactly the way it is produced and I want it in its original standard release, I did go ahead and touch up this guy with paint, but we'll take a look at that closer to the end of the review. But all in all the details are here for your Steel figure. A lot of very reminiscent things that I have seen before in other versions of him. But one thing is, he does have all the cool little dents and dings and rivets that you come to expect from McFarlane's designs. Let's take a look at the head sculpt. I really love this head sculpt. Now, at first, I was kind of put off by it, but the more I've had it in hand and the more I've looked at it, it's a real, even haunting head sculpt where he kind of has a menacing feel to him, almost like a dark tone, like a creepy tone to him, which I never really got before from a Steel figure. But for some reason, this one does have that, menacing vibe to him. But you really get those cool features of the character coming to life from the head sculpt and design. Really great work done by McFarlane. Let's take a look at the articulation. Does look down very well. Also looks up very well, which is going to be great for flight posing, but also you could mod this and get a little bit more range. You do got right to left. And of course you could tilt his head for some attitude. All in all, great articulation at the head with that double barbell. Let's take a look at the waist articulation. You do have side to side. You got the full tilt-a-whirl at the waist, giving him a lot of range. Lower waist swivel, upper chest swivel. You could twist him, get him in some awesome poses for battle. Now, doesn't have that much of a crunch. I mean, it's there, but it's not as much as you would like. But you could always mod that as well if you want to. But for some reason, the waist crunch, like that's not a big thing for me. And if I ever really wanted a character to bend over and touch his toes, then I would just mod it. For some figures that does work, like Nightwing or more acrobatic characters. But I think for Steel, you're wearing a metal of armor and people want you to do like Pilates and the splits. And I just really don't understand it and I don't see it. So that's fine. But of course, you can lean him back and get him in some awesome flight poses using the head articulation as well. Let's take a look at the shoulder. You do have a lot of range. This is a really smooth range of articulation that you get from that sort of socket and bushing shoulder joint that McFarlane uses. You even got a lot of up and down movement and front to back. Got a bicep swivel. Beautiful double jointed elbows, which actually look really clean. Straighten them back out. You do have these really nice shoulder pauldrons, beautiful design, and the way the cape flows over it looks really natural. Moving down, I kind of really dig the skin, like not skin tone, but tone of plastic that the arm is actually molded in. Looks really good, which is a sort of iron or steel looking color, and then down into that gauntlet apparatus that I think he uses. He like uses it to fire stuff from it. And of course, into the wrist, you do have that awesome four ways of articulation that McFarlane gives us. That's really good for when you hold weapons, or in this case, when you hold his hammer. And on the other side, you have the same thing, but you do have a different cuff or bracelet compared to the left side. And then the hand is different as well. It's more of a gripping C hand, while the left side is more of an opened holding hand. You could also use it for gesturing. Pretty nice. Could get him in a T pose really smoothly. Great design. Can't get his arms really above his head. Now you can flex the shoulder pauldrons, but if you wanted him to lift something over his head, you could actually get it out of this. But just straight up to the sides is a little bit restricted. Moving down into the trunks. Love that belt design. Looks really good. Let's take a look at the thigh swivel. Now he does have some thigh swivel there. Now, as always, you can heat these up and get a little bit more movement out of it by breaking out the stiffness. Can kick up. And another thing you could do is move the leg from side to side without having a thigh cut, especially here where there's no way to hide the thigh cut. It would look really ugly just to cut this leg and have that breakup of the sculpt. I really prefer just having the movement at the hip. So you can move his boot from side to side. You can also kick back. The trunks flex a little bit. Now these are a little bit more stiffer than I'm used to, but that works just as well. And when you put the leg back, the trunks go back to their original shape. You can cock out his leg. He does have the McFarlane hip swivel. Double jointed knees. Straighten them out. Up and down at the ankle. No side to side, but you could really move his leg using that hip joint. But you do have rocker, and that is basically from the design of the way they did the boots. All you have is the rocker, but as I said, you could swivel a leg. And then, of course, you got toe articulation. Pretty nice. Another thing a lot of people have a hard time with, and that was standing this figure. Now, I've never made a video on this, but when you stand these figures, you don't want their knees to be locked like in a straight up and down, position. You kind of want to bend them a little bit and give them a little bit of flex. And what that actually does, it makes it a lot easier to stand the figure. See, look at that, without, messing with it a lot. So you want to like give a little bit of bend to the knees for balance. You don't just want to have the knees locked like all the way forward and then try and stand them, because of course it's not going to be as easy. Where if you break up a little bit of the rigidity, all in all, really nice lower body. Look at those boots, man. The design on them is really awesome. Now he is missing a detail that sometimes he has, which is like some tubes from the side of his hip down into the boots. But I think that's in like the earlier renditions of his costume, and this is based off a little bit more later on in his crime fighting career. But those boots do look awesome. Great design. And I could see where people say that if you were to give it some shinier silver paint, it would really make the boots, pop and give them some separation from the actual leg portion of the figure and separate it down into the metallic boots, which we will take a look at the end of the video. Take a look at him from the bottom. No identifying marks, but he has some rather interesting tread with some like thrusters, which of course in the comics he does use some sort of powered version of flight going up the back. Not really much in sculpt detail. You do have some cool texture there. But one thing I will say, this is an all new body, all new sculpt, which is definitely a positive when we're talking about each figure's design. Moving into the back, now you do have the cape, very pliable cape. And also something else is that I've never seen this version of a cape before. Would be great for a Superman, just the way it's straight and has a little bit of flow to it. It just really works, with this figure. And going into the back, you get the back of his helmet, which has some really cool color. And that's something that kind of works in his favor, is that the plastic, like on his neck and even the head, has a little bit of marbling to it, which has like swirl, like embedded into the plastic. But it actually works for him because he's supposed to be, completely metal character. All in all, looks really, really awesome. Now, of course, you can add the hammer to him and get him in some very nice flight poses. Some cool figure photography can be done with this guy. He is really fun. I'll give him that much. I had a lot of fun putting him in different poses for the short time that I messed around with him before the review. And another thing you can do is you can actually add all kinds of thrusters that McFarlane has given us, like these from the Batman Beyond. And although it doesn't work exactly, you do get the gist of what I'm trying to get here. Now, finishing up, I do want to go into bringing out my original DC Superheroes Steel S3 Select Sculpt figure. And of course, this was my steel. This was my steel figure forever. Cool figure. Four Horsemen did an awesome job. They did add some details that McFarlane didn't, like the tubes on the side, the complete shield. It doesn't have that cutoff, but of course, this was probably designed more after the 90s or the 2000s version of steel. Great figure. I'm not going to put it down, although the articulation is a little bit dated. He also doesn't have any kind of forward crunch. I mean, it is very minimal, even though he has that sort of hinge, sort of legend style crunch. He really doesn't get much more than this guy does. So, not really anything lost there. I love his hammer, looks really good. Now, he doesn't get any head movement up, which would really restrict you getting any sort of flying poses. And another thing is, there is an alternate version of him, but it's not nothing major. The only thing it is that the S shield on his chest is actually chromed out with a really shiny sort of mirror finish silver. But I do have the regular standard version, and that is fine. Now, there is also a platinum version of the McFarlane steel. Actually, this one kind of looks better to me, especially with the contrast of the red cape with all the dark colors. And for some reason, that one is just gray with more gray. So I'm not gonna fret too much about getting that platinum. I mean, if I pick them up, fine. If I find them in the wild, it'll be awesome. Eventually, I usually do pick up the platinums. It just depends. I don't want to pay an absorbent amount of money for a platinum, but I will spend about 40, dollars. That's, 40, $50 is a cutoff for me for paying for a platinum. It just depends how much I really want it. Now, another thing I wanted to do was actually bring out a Superman to stand him with. And this is actually my custom recovery suit Superman. Now, I did put the mullet head on him from the Superman in Crypto from the collector's edition. But this is just getting us into that, Reign of Superman ambiance. I mean, these two guys look really good together. Of course, this is Superman after he recovers from the beating of his life that he got from Doomsday. And actually, the Steel is taller than him, just barely. So that is actually pretty nice because that means he scales a little bit bigger than your average McFarlane figure, which is totally understandable for a Steel figure. Now let's go ahead and take a look at my repainting. Now, first off, I did repaint his hammer with a little bit more of a silver sheen. And then I went back and added some actual chrome details to the head of the hammer with my chrome pen. So chrome pens are really interesting because they do work and they can leave you like a really nice, shiny, almost mirror finish to your chrome pieces. But the drawback of that is that it takes a long time for it to actually dry. I mean, to where you can touch it and it kind of has like a little bit like a hard finish to it. It can take up to weeks, even months for it to actually dry. So once you actually add that chrome paint, just don't touch it and just leave it, as much as you can. Just let it sit. Eventually, it'll get dry enough where you could touch it and not smear it or mess up the finish in any way. But I do like the shinier finish to this hammer. Now, as you could see from my finished product of Steel, I did chrome out most of the parts that you're supposed to. I did the shoulder pauldrons, which now really pop and separate themselves, especially sitting alongside the red cape. I did the wrist gauntlets as well, and you could see them once again separating themselves from the plastic color of the arms and the hands. Really, really contrast beautifully now that they had that added silver sheen. I did the belt, which is another thing that really pops. And then, of course, I did the boots, and you could really see how that shiny silver paint just makes a big difference. Now, for real detail, what I went ahead and did is I added some chrome paint to the rivets on his head, to his ears, which are really just more, encasing his ears and a design of the mask, but it just gives him that little separation. And then, of course, I did the shield in the same chrome pen color. Now, once this dries, it'll have a little sort of hard finish to it, but I don't want to touch it right now. But it does give that reflective, surface look to it that just finishes off this Steel figure perfectly. Mm, One last detail, and this is another thing I did. I actually added some pearl metallic white paint to the eyes. Now, they were white to start with, but for me, they were just a little bit dull. And with that pearl metallic paint, they actually give a little bit of glow to them, like a little sheen that you could just see when you turn them in the light. Just gives that little reflective gleam and actually gives the figure a little bit of life. So I am really happy with this custom paint job. I should have been done with this video, with this review since yesterday, but I had to take my time and tape off the figure and paint him and let him dry a little bit so that, I could actually touch him for this review. But for me, he is awesome. Really enjoyed this figure, really enjoyed looking at him, and he's an awesome addition, not only to the Reign of Superman portion of your collection, but to your complete DC Multiverse collection. So, anyways, guys, that is Steel. This was an awesome figure. I recommend them. You don't necessarily have to pick them up if you don't want to, but for $22.99 as a standard release is an awesome figure. But anyways, you guys keep hunting out there, keep collecting, keep customizing, and I will see you on the next one.
call me Crazy Joe, but now they can call me Batman.